Now, I had this one as this is a very important question to me because I know people, yourself included, who nowadays you have multiple encounters with heaven. I know many people now who have had multiple encounters with heaven. Some of them claim to have had it as a child, or even as some people wonder if some of these encounters happened while they were still in the womb. So, my question, you may be able to tell where I'm going with this: Christ in the womb, or as a baby, or as a young boy, or in his walk of ministry, did he have multiple encounters with heaven during any of those times?
I would say yes. Most of them weren't necessarily in heaven. His father would come down on the mountain, and Christ said would go to the mountain. He would go to the hills. He would go to be with him.
Okay.
So yes, there were times throughout his life where he met, and I already shared the revelation about the cup, that when Christ began his carpentry, he made a cup. He made this goblet for the Father out of wood. It was beautiful. It wasn't embellished with gold or gems, but he made it. And on one of the trips when he went to meet with him, he actually gave it to him. He gave it to the Father.
Really?
At this time, he knew he was the Son of God. How did he know that? It wasn't just the Spirit telling him. I know that there were times when he would go and meet with him and be with him, not necessarily in heaven, but literally at a place on the earth where they would meet and he would talk. He gave him that goblet as a gift to him because he gave him that gift of carpentry when he sent him. And so when he finally learned to do it really well, he took it to him and gave him this cup. And that cup that he brought to the Father at that time when he was on the earth is the same cup the Father had to send back with all the wickedness, evil, and corruption, and death, and everything. That was the cup he had to drink out of in the garden that the two angels brought him from heaven.
And you're saying, Kat, that was a literal cup he took a drink out of? Just to be clear.
The cup was a literal cup. The cup was a real cup.
And what about the cup that people talk about? What do they call it? The Last Supper cup. Is this one and the same? The Last Supper cup, which they call everyone was going looking for the. I can't.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. I don't know about any of that. I think the Last Supper cup was a totally different cup.
Okay, all right.
That was him breaking bread. That was him sealing himself with his disciples, knowing that he wouldn't be with them, not in the same way. He knew that was the last thing, the meal they would have together, and they drank out of that cup. They dipped this up and they all drank out of the same cup. This cup was never drinking out of by anyone except Christ in the garden. So if it was just a cup that was used commonly in different places, in the area by other people, I mean, obviously it was brought to serve their drinking. That wasn't necessarily a special cup made. But the one that Christ made as a gift and gave to his Father was the exact same cup that the two angels brought from heaven to Christ in the garden, and he had to drink. That's one of the things that really shook him, was it was the cup he gave to his Father. And here it is coming back to him with all the sins of the world.
Oh, wow.
That he had to drink out of that cup.
Man.
He had to drink out of the cup he had given as a gift, and his Father sending it back with something that would save all humanity. But he could say no.
And is that what is meant, or is at least the concept, not necessarily that exact event, but is that the concept where it says he became sin for us? He drinks the cup. Sin, though he never partook of it himself,
that's right,
had to become it.
Yes,
because have you gotten any more in mystery? Do you get any deeper? Any concept of what he went through when he becomes sin? What was he feeling?
Well, he was bleeding great drops of blood. I mean, great drops of blood were coming out of the pores of his skin.
Right.
Because of knowing what it was he had to drink. He wasn't guilty. Not even then was he guilty. He was carrying that in his holy body. It had to be holy. He was the only one at that time that was holy. He was the sacrifice chosen by God, holy and perfect. And he was the only one who could take that and drink it. And I think at any time he could have said, I'm not doing this. And I'm sure that ran through his mind, or he would not have said, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. He didn't want to put evil in him. It didn't consume him, control him. but he had to carry it. That sin is what had to be nailed to the cross in his body. The only way that could happen is if he drank it. And the only place it came from was heaven. God himself had to put it in the cup. This is a gift from his son. He had to put it in the cup. He sent these two angels who were special, who knew Jesus, who loved Jesus. They brought it to him in the garden, and then they comforted him. They had to comfort him. I think they may have been the same two who comforted him in the desert after his 40 days in the desert. But I do know this, the same two that brought him the cup in the garden, and he was so struggling to, in his perfect body of holiness, he is holy, still was holy, drank all of the sins of the world for all time. He drank it, he put it in his body, he died in that moment to his flesh. He had to say, not my will, but your will be done, and he drank it. And so here he is. I'm sure his body is probably shuddering. Physically, he was affected by it, mentally, emotionally, but he knew that that had to be the only sacrifice. There's no other way he could bring us back to the Father, and he knew that, but he chose to obey. Because of his obedience, he became the sacrifice for us. That's why Jesus Christ is the only one who can forgive sins. He's the only one who bore it in his body. It was nailed to the cross forever. He said, it is finished. In other words, he paid the price for our salvation to happen. If we choose it, he paid that price.
Wow. I don't want to ask you any other questions after that. I just want to end on that, Kat. That's just so profound. And he had several times, he said to his disciples, are you able to drink the cup that I may have to drink? So he was planning on it all along. He knew that cup was coming.
He did know. He did know the cup would be sent, because his Father had explained to him before he ever left, while he was still the Word, he had to say yes to all of it. He said yes there, but it certainly wasn't the same as being in the garden and experiencing it himself. I do want to add one thing. As a reward, you can imagine what those two angels were experiencing with him. They had to be really strong. They had to be strong. They couldn't fight people. They couldn't prevent it from happening. They knew the torment and the suffering. They knew what he would have to go through. So their reward was they went to the tomb with him. Really? When he was buried, they were in the tomb. They were the two. The reward was to roll the stone away. The reward was the first two to ever see him risen from the dead were those same two angels who were in the tomb when he came back into his body. They rolled the stone away so he could get out. And those are the same two angels I saw when I was in Israel.
I was about to ask you that, because we were there together in that tomb. You and I were together, and you said the angel's still here.
Yes.
And I was thinking, because I don't feel it, but you absolutely did.
Yeah.
Wow. That's profound. And Kat, just on closing that, what did you see at the tomb that day? We were all there in Israel 3 or 4 years ago. What did you see there at that garden tomb that everyone goes to? How would you describe what you saw?
The glory of God is still in the tomb. The glory where he laid. The glory when he exploded out of hell and came up into his body. He was instantly glorified. Now, people don't even talk about that. That was him. That was him different. He wasn't the same. He wasn't the same, even though he was the Son of God. He wasn't the same as when he laid in his dead body was there. Okay. He wasn't the same. He was changed. He overcame hell, death, the grave. He took back the authority. That's why he went into hell. He had to do that. It was finished for our sins, but for our authority and our dominion, he had to go there and defeat hell. He had to. He had to take back the keys. He had to take the glory that Satan had stolen. That's why he took all the gemstones off of him. He had to put terror in the heart of every demon. And usually principalities and powers are not in hell. They're on thrones around the world. Well, Satan called them in because he was going to torment them. Talk about the biggest sting operation ever. That would have been the biggest sting operation.
Yeah.
So he was glorified that instant when he took the keys of hell, death, and the grave, all the gemstones off. He took back our authority, our rights as a believer in Jesus Christ, that we rule and reign with him now. We are kings and priests unto our God. Those are levels of dominion and authority. He took back that right for us to be that way. We have the right to command the army of heaven because we are joint heirs with Jesus Christ. You can't live in sin and think you're going to do it. I have to say that. But the reward for those two angels were so significant that they were willing to bring him the cup, be with him in the garden, then be with him in the tomb, waiting on him because they knew he would be back. They knew he would be back. And here he comes up through the grave into his body. All of the old garments are thrown off of him. He is now glorified. He has got the glory coming out of every pore of his physical body. His eyes are as a flame of fire. The presence and power of God was so great. And then they go out and roll the stone away so he can come out. And I love the fact that one of the first things Jesus did was step in the garden and smell the flowers because he loves flowers.
Wow. That's profound. Wow, Kat, thank you so much for this, man.